Hey everyone, it's Last Protagonist. I've had a bunch of questions come up regarding the Primordial Nightlord Rune's translation, so I figured I'd make a quick video on it. Instead, I procrastinated for a few months and found there's a lot more that I want to talk about, so strap on in. The official localization for the English version of the Primordial Nightlord's Rune says it's a thing with the properties of a great rune harbored by the Primordial Nightlord. The cutting-gifted tribe anticipated the coming night and spent many a moon planning its prevention, concluding that their only chance at success was to cheat a god. They had glimpsed what they should not, the very sin of the Erdtree. For their trespass, so were they punished. The Japanese for it is a little different, and here's my retranslation of the same text. The Primordial Nightlord's Rune is a thing which has the same qualities of a great rune that resided within the Primordial Nightlord. The tree-cloning tribe spent many years preparing. In order to stop the coming night, they had no choice but to resort to extraordinary methods with which they would deceive the gods. That was the punishment imposed upon the clan which had glimpsed the sins of the Erdtree. Although I've called them the tree-cloning tribe in my translation, I want to be clear that calling them the cutting-gifted tribe isn't exactly inaccurate. The term cutting comes from is sashiki, which does literally mean a cutting from a tree when translated directly into English. However, without providing further context, the cutting-gifted tribe can end up sounding like a bunch of really skilled lumberjacks, especially when considering how they're crucible axe knights already. Fortunately, the Japanese isn't as ambiguous, and the cutting-gifted tribe should be understood as having been gifted tree cuttings, though the Japanese doesn't mention any tree cuttings being gifted to the tribe. Instead, that information may have been taken from the passages in the crypt talking about branches being sent to Windwell Knoll in the deep woods. Oh, actually on that note, the passages talking about the ways of cutting can also be a little misleading, and an alternative way of reading them is that the guidance of the tree cuttings points to Windwell Knoll and the deep woods respectively. Of course, it's unclear if the guidance of the tree cuttings is meant to be taken to be similar to the guidance of grace. It is a FromSoft game after all. Nonetheless, this information can help recontextualize what we know of the cutting-gifted tribe, as well as potentially the so-called original sin of Marika and the Erdtree. But before going down that rabbit hole, there's another thing we should examine first. The cord end. Quote, a carefully woven cord. This cord belonged to the young girls who were housed in a place that was meant as an eternal secret. The cutting-gifted tribe vowed to sacrifice their flesh while concealing the truth. But the girls were too young to oblige. Unfortunately, I will once again need to defer to the Japanese for some additional insight. Here's my retranslation. Quote, a diligently braided cord tip. It was originally something that was gripped by little girls who were confined in what should have been a concealed location. The tree-cloning tribe made a vow. They offered their flesh so nothing would be exposed. However, the girls were too young for it. To talk shop about semantics really quick, the reason I called it a cord tip as opposed to a cord end is because while the kanji itoguchi can describe the end of a thread or a rope, it can also mean the tip, start, or beginning of something which isn't incompatible with English text, but would require a bit more reading between the lines to understand. With that being said, I don't know how relevant it would be if the girls were grasping onto the tip of a thread rather than the end of one, but it could nonetheless be vital in someone else's theory crafting and trying to connect what the cutting-gifted tribe is doing to the young girls in the Erdtree's potential sin. For me, I could see the girls holding onto the tip of a thread as being part of the symbolism of their eventual transformation. As a quick recap, since it's so rare, the cord end can be used to unlock a hidden sealed door in the ravine in the middle of the map just north of the castle near a crab. Behind the door is a small cave with the figure of a woman whose hands are wrapped with a cord like a rosary, and in front of her are 3 sacrificial twigs. The implication being the girls spoken of in the cord end description becoming the sacrificial twigs. There's a marked difference in saying the girls were too young to oblige being sacrificed, as if they had a choice in the matter, versus being too young for it, so we're left to wonder whether something different would have happened if the girls were older. If girls who were too young to be properly sacrificed produced sacrificial twigs, then would girls who are older produce something greater? It seems entirely possible the cuttings that were gifted to those of the Windwell Knoll, deep woods, and other locations could have originally come from these kinds of human sacrifices. Since sacrificial twigs are used to cheat death, it makes me wonder, Does the way the gods were cheated in the Primordial Nightlord Rune come from literally cheating death? Could the so-called guidance of the cutting-gifted tribe act similarly to the guidance of grace and continue to revive the dead over and over? And if so, is that the reason the Duchess's cutting-gifted tribe ancestors are interred at the base of the Round Table Hold? To keep the Nightfarers nightfaring? Perhaps. But these are merely guesses, and much is open to speculation. Moving on, one thing I want to touch on is the quintessentially Japanese concept of musubi. No, not that one. Musubi is used to represent the connection or metaphysical tie in the relationships between pretty much everything. In some ways, the idea behind musubi is almost akin to that of string theory, which posits the universe is composed of one fundamental force that vibrates like a string, which can produce different observable phenomena like particles and the building blocks of matter based on those vibrations. In Shintoism, the power of creation is contained within relationships and bonds, or musubi, and is not limited by time, space, or physical contact. I'd forgotten about it, but in my research into musubi for this video, I'd come across a few wonderful articles by Okunomichi and chrisesandcrosses.com talking about the importance of musubi in the anime Kimi no Na wa, or Your Name, which I'll link in the video description. Without giving too much away, the central theme of the movie revolves around the concept of musubi and how the bonds between people transcend the bounds of time and space. For example, one of the main characters named Mitsuha is a miko or shrine maiden of a very small town, and part of her duties includes continuing braiding cords, or kumihimo, in the traditional style of her village's shrine. However, the reason for the shrine's annual festival and kumihimo were lost in a fire 200 years prior. Nonetheless, her grandmother explains that time itself is musubi, and it connects Mitsuha and her little sister to over 1,000 years of their town's history when they continue carrying on the form of their kumihimo. It can't be understated how important the concept of musubi is to Your Name, and one minor example of this is that even the name of the town, Itomori, has the character for thread in it, so it's definitely worth a watch or rewatch with this perspective in mind. Now, I'd been somewhat familiar with the concept of musubi before, but I'd only ever seen it written one way with a singular kanji which includes the Shinto meaning of the word, but was used a bit more generically to mean connections or bonds in general. However, Chris's and Cross's article mentioned that the kanji for musubi was different in the past, and instead was represented by the characters for generate and spirit. This was my first time of hearing musubi being the generative force of the spirit, and with some further research into the topic, I found that musubi essentially comes from the names of two of the three hitorigami, or Japanese deities of creation, named Takami Musuhi and Kami Musuhi. The kanji used in their names differ from the musubi from earlier, and are written as mu, su, hi respectively, with mu meaning to generate, su meaning a den, nest, or place of procreation, and hi meaning a kind of vital essence, though in this case it is written with the character for sun. It's interesting to me how the characters for Rikari and the sun would later become replaced by rei, which means spirit, but the important thing to note is that musuhi or musubi is considered the generative power of creation in the universe, as well as what binds things together. I realize by now it may sound like I've gone off the deep end of tying Shintoism to Elden Ring, so I want to pull back a bit and clarify that if these concepts have been included in the game, they should be taken as a soft point of inspiration rather than something more direct. But with that being said, it's clear that the symbolism of braids and thread is extremely important in Elden Ring, and having this kind of cultural context may help with our understanding of the significance of items like the cord end, or perhaps even the thread-like strings Marika brandishes in the Shadow of the Erdtree story trailer. If strings and threads can represent the bonds of relationships which extend beyond the realms of time and space, could that tie into how the laws of causality and regression link all things together in a chain of relation? One that pulls at all things, yearning eternally to converge? Perhaps the power contained within the Elden Ring is the power of musubi, an immutable force that conjoins things together, creating order.
Heresy is not native to the world. It is but a contrivance. All things can be conjoined.
Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please consider liking and subscribing to help with the algorithm. And if you want to support the channel more, consider becoming a channel member or patron for as little as $1 a month, which will grant you permanent VIP status and access to a secret Discord channel containing pictures of the world's blurriest dog. Anyway, that'll be it for me. Hopefully I'll catch you on the next one. So until then, take care, stay safe, and remember, fear the old lore.